Once you become aware of what Israel does in the world, it becomes very hard to understand them. Bombing cities to rubble, forced mass expulsions, false flag operations, riots defending grape culture, and extreme systematic oppression. You see, there are many notable areas of Israeli brutality we could cover, but today we are going to focus on the daily terror happening in the Palestinian West Bank. Right now, over 700,000 illegal Israeli settlers are currently taking over internationally recognized Palestinian land, and these settlers are backed by the Israeli military, armed by American guns, and funded in part by Zionist Christian church donations. Folks, this episode is brutal. We are covering mob violence, arson, farmers being attacked, animals being tortured for fun, and we even interview an American dad whose son was beaten to death by Israeli settlers. To uncover the truth, we sat down with those that have seen and lived this firsthand. You are going to hear from former U.S. Marines, Palestinian Americans, an IDF soldier, and even a Jewish survivor of Nazi occupation who now speaks out against Israel. Folks, we have the raw footage to back up everything I'm about to tell you. However, we have to edit it carefully as most of it is too horrific to be allowed on YouTube. Folks, a quick disclaimer. I love my life, I love my family, and I am in perfect health. Another thing to address is we know this video is going to be shadow banned hard. So I'm asking you, the viewer, to help me fight against the algorithm. Hit the like button, write a comment, and imagine every single one of these actions as a salute against this Israeli behavior.
My name is Kamel. I'm a U.S. American citizen. My son Saif, who was also an American citizen, was beaten to death by Israeli settlers.
I want people to get an idea of what life is like in Palestine and in your village in Sinjar, where this all happened.
You get up in the morning, you gotta find out where's the checkpoints that day. This is how it is, Tommy. They can put a barrier anytime that they want. Looks like they're closing the road here because they have a gate in front of this village of Turmus Aya, and anytime they want to close it, they close it. Last night, they had this new road that we made between my village and a neighboring village. They were happy about this road, man. It's all new asphalt put on this road. Israeli authority came, just demolished the whole road.
With a bulldozer.
With the bulldozer. Just because, basically. They just want to make life as hard as they can on the Palestinians.
In an area we could say about the size of Delaware, that this land is, that they have 702 checkpoints set up.
And only growing.
My name is Mohammed Daoud. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, I'm a security provider, and I'm the co-founder of PalShield. My name is Bilal Daoud. I'm a cybersecurity specialist, and I'm a co-founder of PalShield, where we track settler violence and protect Palestinian communities.
The topic of the story is life under Israeli occupation. Do you think that's a fair title?
Perfect title for what we're all dealing with in the West Bank.
And what makes it life under occupation?
Everything from as simple as wanting to get to school, say building a well, and water scarcity, it's the Middle East, so the water under your feet is regulated and watched by the Israeli authorities.
Tell you how many stories we know on a personal level of women like giving birth on a checkpoint because they wouldn't clear them to go to the hospital. I mean, it's just crazy.
What do you think the Israeli goal is in all of this?
Displacement, land theft. In the context of Palestine today, they want it all without the Palestinians. So they want the land without the people.
They are extremely calculated, and they know how to slowly push people out.
My name is Clyde. I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran, Christian, who visited Palestine to expose the truth of what's going on, and I'm here to expose the truth of Christian Zionism in America. As soon as you drive in, it is clear as day. Like I said, you can see the difference between the Palestinian village, and it would have barbed wire fences around it. They would cordon them off and literally block them in. So like a village would be its own little camp, its own like kind of concentration camp. And at times the Israeli military will go in and they'll lock those gates up so that the Palestinians literally can't leave their village. Once they get out of their little village, if the gates open, they leave. I used to think it was 700, but I just confirmed it's over 900 checkpoints within the West Bank. And the West Bank is a tiny plot of land. The whole of the Holy Land is like the size of New Jersey. The West Bank is a tiny little chunk of that. Research can only paint so much of a picture. When you go there, it's completely different. You see it firsthand, you feel it firsthand, and how it actually literally is an open air prison.
Folks, to understand the modern settler movement, let me take you back to 1968. Meet Rabbi Moshe Levinger. For him, evicting hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to build the land of Israel was not enough. He wanted more land. So he organized a militant following that had one clear mission: cross over the border and take the West Bank. So he brought his radical crew to the city of Hebron and went to an Arab innkeeper and said they would be spending one night to celebrate a peaceful Passover tradition. But in typical Israeli fashion, he lied. In fact, his crew woke up the next morning and declared that this inn was theirs and that the hotel owner needed to leave. And at this point, they were surrounded by the Palestinians that actually lived there, and Rabbi Levinger put the Israeli government in a pickle. They could decide to drag Levinger's crew out by force, or they could send in the military to protect them. And afraid of the terrible optics of evicting illegal squatters, the Israeli government sent in the military. And folks, this is the same playbook that you see in use today. Israeli settlers will lie, cheat, and take by force land that is not theirs, play the victims, and then call in the IDF to protect them.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
And to be clear, to everyone except for Israelis and Zionists, this is known as breaking international law. This land is not theirs.
And there are currently 144 settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, all illegal under international law.
But just look at how Israeli far-right leader Ben Gvir feels about the way that they take over land. This guy is actually broadcasting the Israeli plan to the world. It's an equation that involves supremacy, forced evictions, and the military bulldozing the generational homes of the Palestinians. And folks, in a way, we are the ones enabling it, because right now, both our tax dollars and our American weapons are being used to do this by our so-called greatest ally.
And so in the West Bank, it's total occupation. I'm sure you've heard of the Area A, B, and C.
By splitting these areas into areas A, B, and C, they established different rules for these different areas. So areas A, you didn't have any Israeli authorities in there. You had the Palestinian Authority. Areas B, where we live, is under Palestinian civil administration. So, for example, we have a village council, but in terms of
security control under Israel. Even though Area A is technically supposed to be under full PA authority, we know, well, it's not, because these areas get raided all the time by the Israeli Defense Forces.
The ones who live in the PA have their own area I can't go in. They can come into the joint area.
So Area A, there's no IDF, there's no settlers.
There is IDF operations targeting terrorists, and that's in and out, but not a presence. You want to have IDF presence in those areas.
The IDF's purpose in the West Bank, not only as an occupation force, but is solely to protect the settlers that are living there. Since the 60s, 70s, the settlers have become more militarized, and you have a good solid, I don't want to exaggerate, between 50 to 100,000 armed men, right? Settlers, these guys are many of them are probably IDF reservists as well. So you have a clash. I mean, it's not a conflict of interest, because it is the same goal. We see the settlers and the army as one and the same.
The Hilltop Youth, are they employed? How do they have the time to just stand around all day to wait for a Palestinian vehicle?
they're paid.
There's also, they like to swap them out every few months too, to kind of get some new blood.
Stop it!
Let's dive deeper into the Hilltop Youth. They are largely made up of Israeli high school dropouts, and many are known to have learning disabilities and behavioral disorders. These guys believe the West Bank is their divine right promised to them by God, and they follow radical leaders like Mayor Ettinger, guys who extremist networks are tied to horrific crimes like firebombing a Palestinian couple and their 18-month-old baby to death. And guys, sheep are the secret weapon of the Hilltop Youth. You see, they bring their sheep to graze on Palestinian land, and and then they violently attack any Palestinian that comes near them and thus begins the takeover of the land. And this approach works. Since October 7th, settlers have permanently expelled 76 different Palestinian communities. And it's so out of control that even the head of Israel's own intelligence agency, the Shin Bet, has publicly condemned their actions as, quote, Jewish terrorism. They said it, not me. And folks, despite this, the Israeli military continues to help them with their crimes.
I know that the settlers have little like militia groups, so it's a joint effort from the Israeli military, the Israeli police, and the settlers. So when settlers go in and they harass the Palestinians, the military is not going to come in and intervene and stop the settlers from killing or damaging property. They're going to enable it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw that video of that settler who beat the woman over with a stick.
You got it. Oh, come on, don't. He hit her! Hey! Oh my God. Hey! Hey! Hey!
She was just harvesting olives, bro.
During the olive harvest, for many Palestinian families, is like one of their main sources of income throughout the entire year. And so the first thing that Israeli settlers will do is they'll attack those crops. They'll burn those trees down. They'll attack livestock. They will drive their ATVs in grazing areas and run over livestock. They'll force a family away from while they're harvesting their olives, and then steal the bags that are already been filled. I mean, it doesn't stop with them. Anything you can imagine they do, they do.
Is it encoded into the psychology of an Israeli to hate the Palestinians?
Yeah, it's ingrained in their society from birth.
במלחמת שמאל או ימין?
אמצע.
ניצחון בעיניי.
חוק אותם?
שתי מדינות לשני עמים.
פצצת אטום, כדי שנחיה.
אפשר לחיות עם ערביי ישראל?
ערבי טוב זה ערבי.
They're so brainwashed that they believe stealing Palestinian land is the right thing to do.
For those that think it's ridiculous to label Israel as an apartheid state, don't take it from me. Take it from the words of a man that literally invented the system of apartheid in South Africa, their Prime Minister, Hendrik Verwoerd.
Our policy is one which is called by an Afrikaans word, apartheid.
When asked about Israel, he bluntly stated, Israel, like South Africa, is an apartheid state. And that's from the OG of apartheid. Folks, we're talking about miles of fences, segregated road systems, and military force being used to bulldoze and kick people off their own land. I mean, it even goes as far as people are getting the shit kicked out of them for praying or for trying to attend a funeral of one of their friends or family members that was killed by the Israelis. This is simply how life is in the West Bank.
My name is Ido Amiaz, aka The Saluki. My mission is to continue the work that I'm doing, my journalism in the occupied West Bank, and to demonstrate life under occupation. I've sacrificed quite a bit. In fact, I was taken by Israel and I was held in a mental institution for 17 days. They made a claim that because I'm going around the West Bank, this was at the very beginning of the genocide after October 7th, that I'm out of my mind and that I'm a risk to myself. If you're a risk to yourself or a risk to others, then you may be hospitalized, according to Israel. So I was held in a mental hospital, and the only way I got out of there is by dropping about $10,000 on lawyers.
Folks, we are told by our government and mainstream media that one of the reasons we have to support this behavior is because Israel is the only remaining bastion of democracy in the Middle East.
The UN was obsessively hostile towards Israel, the one true democracy in the Middle East.
But let me ask you this. Do you think it's democratic to have the reputation of killing more journalists in this conflict than ever before in history? And ask the Israeli citizens, are you not being censored from publishing videos of missile strikes in your own city? And finally, let's talk about the press, both foreign and Israeli. It is well known that they have to submit their stories to the IDF censor department to get approved, and that this department has the power to kill any story that they don't want coming out. This is the democracy that we're fighting for?
One of the worst things I've heard or seen, a dear friend of mine, Auda Haslin, he was shot by an Israeli settler. What was his crime? The Israeli settlers brought equipment to tear down houses and olive trees within his village, and him and some of the Palestinians, I'm not sure if even he did, threw rocks at them in retaliation, and he caught a bullet. Guess what happened to the Israeli settler? Nothing. He was 3 days in house arrest, and now he's walking free. Yinon Yelevi, his name is. This sense of entitlement and superiority is prevalent in the average Israeli. Obviously, if you go somewhere like Tel Aviv or Haifa where people are more chill, then they wouldn't have a problem with Palestinians and they might believe in a two-state solution. But at the end of the day, the majority of Israel is not Tel Aviv and Haifa where people are more open-minded and left-leaning. The majority of Israel are cities like Ashdod, like Nahariya, where I was born, where people do think that they're simply better than other people.
What are some examples of the things that Israeli settlers are doing to people right now?
We could start with, burning the land, burning crops, burning homes, throwing rocks at vehicles, sometimes fire bombs, sometimes shooting at these vehicles.
You might have a Palestinian ambulance, and they'll literally pull up in front of the ambulance and slow down. These are just basic Israeli settler civilians, hoping that the person injured or whatnot would essentially die off. It's a loathing and a hatred that I don't think I've seen really in any other version of, like, any other conflict. There's a sense of entitlement to these settlers. They really seriously believe that the land that we are under, that we've been around, that we've been on, that we've lived in, that our heritage is built around, is theirs by God.
They were given basically M16s to anyone that wanted to go get.
Where do those M16s come from?
USA.
Yep, you heard that right. We are sending American guns to Israel, and they are getting handed out by guys like Ben-Gvir to Israeli settlers that then in turn use them to attack Palestinians, some of which are Palestinian Americans. And it got so bad that in 2023, the Biden administration halted the sale of rifles to Israel because of all of these settler attacks. Ah yes, our greatest ally is using our own guns to attack Americans and innocent Palestinians. How wonderful. For those not familiar, Ben-Gvir is a far-right Israeli politician known for his bloodlust in eradicating Palestinians. He's the type of guy that enjoys wearing noose pendants on his shirt for fun. And here he is celebrating the recent law that legalized the death penalty for Palestinians. And this has widely been criticized as a racist apartheid law. As long as Ben-Gvir remains alive, he will be a guy that advocates for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians entirely.
So the American taxpayer money is going to Palestine, to Israel, using it to kill Americans. Remember, our village is 80% American.
So me and you are both two American entrepreneurs who've paid a lot in taxes. What does it make you think when your hard-earned tax money is going to the death of your sons?
It kills you knowing that your own money funded people that directly had something to do with the murder of your own son.
Dude, oh man, I could, you want to talk about the foreign aid, or you want to talk about the shadow money that gets funneled through shadow nonprofits?
Which is multitudes of more money.
Man, so like I could just talk about the Central Fund of Israel as an example. I think 98% of all funding that went towards the settlement expansion project went through this specific 501c3. They are 501c3.
You can get a tax rebate for this. Like, the US is really just a big fat cow for them to just suck dry.
Use and abuse.
Israel would not be able to do what it does. It would not be able to have the control that it has and function as a state without the free money that we're giving them every year.
Talk about the 1960s. The Israeli settlers, they moved in, they took over land, they took over people's homes, and still to this day, you have on camera Israeli settlers marching into Palestinian homes, sitting down, going into the fridge and saying, "This is my house now."
What you don't know is that that's what Arabs do to them all the time.
Do you have video clips of that?
I can get you video clips of that, of course. I don't document it, but I know people who do.
I mean, unlawfully, we had Rabbi Levinger cross into Hebron and then go into an inn, tell the innkeeper he's a Swiss tourist, and then all of a sudden wake up and say he's not leaving. And that was the beginning of the settlements. How is that not clear theft?
In Hebron?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like literally the worst example you're giving, by the way, because Hebron is one of the smallest Jewish communities.
There's no incident ever in the history of Palestine where a Palestinian is just attacking an Israeli anywhere in the West Bank. Like, because to your point earlier, they shouldn't be there in the first place.
Tell me how the Israeli settlers violate international law.
The fact that they're there in the first place is a violation of international law.
There's no pressure by the international community to hold Israel accountable for anything. Israel has us by the throat, and we can't and we won't hold them accountable. And if anybody else, if any of the other Arab nations try to do anything to Israel, we'll sanction them, we'll remove their funding, we might attack them.
By international law, is it legal for these settlers to be in the West Bank?
100% yes, with a caveat that it is disputed.
Because in 1967, Israeli Prime Minister actually was against the settlements because he said it directly violates the Geneva Convention and international law.
In order to answer that question, you actually have to go to what is actual international law that is binding.
The Israelis control all of their resources there, the water, the electricity. For 1 day per week, they get running water. The other 6 days of the week, they have to live off of water tanks. You would see empty water tanks on the side of the building, but they had bullet holes in them. They would drive by and shoot up the water tanks so that they don't have water the rest of the week.
Here, even the water is controlled. Israel's national water company, Mekorot, holds a complete monopoly over the West Bank's water supply. Because Palestinians are forbidden from drilling deep wells and require Israeli permits to dig on their own land, they have to buy their water back directly from Mekorot or rely on bringing in expensive water trucks. Now, Palestinians are only given water every 7 to 10 days, so their roofs are covered in black tanks to hold water in case the supply is cut off completely. But if you look nearby at the illegal Israeli settlements, they are plugged into the same Mekorot grid, and they are given 24/7 access to that water to do anything from fill swimming pools to water their lawns in the desert. Folks, make no mistake, this water monopoly is just another weapon in this apartheid system.
But are you familiar with the water company Mekorot?
Mekorot, yeah.
Palestinians' own water supply, it appears that the Israeli settlers receive 82% of the Palestinian water, and that furthermore in the summer the Palestinians are they have a certain well distance they're prevented of digging from where the settlers are not restricted in that same manner, and that the Palestinians in their own land are restricted to water where the settlers are not.
I'm trying to take this seriously because this is literally the biggest sham that I've seen that goes out to people around the world. The nation of Israel, right? The country of Israel, it pipe and pump water into the Palestinian PA-controlled area in the West Bank and in Gaza with zero compensation from the Palestinians that use that water. Every year comes to the Israeli Knesset and they dispute the money or the debt that has been incurred because of the usage of all the water and the electricity. So both the electric company, which is only one electric company in Israel, we provide free water, free electricity to the PA, and every year these companies bring the debt to the Knesset and say, this is the outstanding debt from years past, and the government basically says, tough crap, and you know what they do to compensate? They charge me more on my electricity and on my water.
Sometimes I just wonder, like, what would a true red-blooded conservative American that really does believe in the same values that we believe, right? Like, you know, liberty, justice, freedom, defending yourself, right?
Dignity, honor, just basic things.
It makes me wonder, like, what would they do if they were under the same circumstances, you know? Like, it's wild. Man.
I'll tell you what they'll do. We did a lot for a lot less.
For tea.
We literally, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the difference, right?
Is resisting anti-Semitic?
Personally, I don't think so.
Why are these older Christians so captured and invested in Israel?
We need to talk about John Darby and his creation of the theological ideology of dispensationalism, which is the idea that God has two different groups of chosen people. He has the Christians, the church, and then he has the Jews. And so that's where Christian Zionism comes from, is from Darby.
Let's break down the mechanics of how Christians are actually funding this brutality you are witnessing. You see, Israel developed a brilliant plan. They do not have to convince the entire American public to participate in the settler movement. They just have to influence how our pastors think. What they do is fly thousands of pastors out to all expenses paid trips to Israel. And when they get their message across, these pastors return to the United States, where they proceed to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars annually into this settler movement. And the reason pastors do this is they believe that Jewish settlement of these areas is necessary to bring about the second coming of Christ. So essentially, to fulfill this prophecy, they are willing to enable the persecution and suffering of thousands along the way. It's actually insane to read about Jesus in the Bible helping the sick and the broken, and then to look up and see these American churches funding a movement that does not seem to respect Christians or even obey the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's property. I thought we had shared Judeo-Christian values. The cognitive dissonance is hard to understand.
So with that in mind, Christian Zionists think they have this fear through cognitive dissonance that if they oppose Israel for whatever reason, whether they're committing genocide blatantly in the open or not, they're turning their back on God. And that is deathly fearful to their mind, thinking to themselves, if I curse Israel, if I go against Israel, even if they commit a genocide, I'm gonna go to hell maybe. They're just willful idiots to them. They don't care about Christianity. They don't care about Jesus. They hate Jesus. They don't care about America.
Guys, it is fascinating to watch Christian Zionists supporting Israel. After all, it is not going so well for Christians over in that part of the world. For starters, it appears it is culturally normal for Jewish adults and children to spit on Christians. And even Officer Tatum, a known Israeli mouthpiece, told Benjamin Netanyahu to his face that he got spit on when he visited the Holy Land.
We had only one incident where a small child spit on one of the pastors.
And let's be real, Israeli spitting is the least of Christian concerns over there. The IDF routinely prevents Christians from worshiping, and Israel literally bombed the last remaining Catholic church in Gaza.
Tonight, a look at the damage to Gaza's only Catholic church after it was struck by Israeli artillery,
which resulted in the Pope calling the act outright barbarity. Folks, if you are pissing the Pope off, you have to be f***ing up big time. And the craziest thing to me about this is that American Christian Zionists are actively funding this. Their churches donate tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year straight to Israel. And it makes me wonder, are these people aware that they are raising money for people that appear not to even like them? Blows my mind.
And to your knowledge, what do Jews believe about Jesus?
From what I've heard, he's desecrating and human shit.
Yeah, no, they see him as a false messiah, like terrible narratives about Jesus and about his mother, about Mary. They call her a whore, a harlot. You know, they call Jesus that he's like I said, a bastard, that he's you know, burning in human excrement. They hate Christians more than they hate Muslims. It is very true that if a Christian were to walk down some areas in Jerusalem or others, that they would be spit on.
Like you see, imagine a mother, a father, and children.
They tell him, hey, spit,
there's
a Christian.
Not even talking, they just do it together. They just all do it. It's like a common practice.
My name is Stephen Kapos, and I am a child survivor of the Holocaust in Hungary, Budapest. I was in hiding on false papers, etc., which happened after October 44. Soon after, our location was caught up in the fighting between Germany and the invading Soviet troops. So we had double jeopardy. I think that's an important background to understanding Gaza, because I can relate to their experience both of the destruction and the fighting, as well as the insecurities of hiding.
Yes. Are you Jewish?
I am indeed, yes.
Would you consider yourself to be anti-Semitic?
Of course not.
And I don't either, but this is how you're going to be labeled and I'm going to be labeled just for speaking out about Israel. Have you gotten attacks like that before?
Yes, I have.
How ridiculous do you find them?
Well, totally ridiculous. But my family lost 15 people to the death camps.
In your assessment, do Israelis view Palestinians in the same way that Germans viewed the Jews?
Yes, I'm afraid, to some extent, unfortunately.
Before we cover the details of your son's murder, can you say who your son was, what he was up to in Florida before he got killed?
My son actually was running the ice cream shop with me, 20-year-old. He graduated high school like 2.5 years ago. I'm kind of an entrepreneur also, like I've run clothing stores, I've done many kind of businesses and stuff like that. I guess he wanted to follow in my footsteps. We found this ice cream shop, so we kind of opened it, and he was running it the whole time. I lived back and forth between the West Bank and the States, and he was living here in Tampa, Florida, like permanently.
Can you describe what happened when your son got killed?
Basically, this summer, his son wanted to go and visit his mother, his brother and sister, and me. We were all in the West Bank. I said, it's fine, then you go ahead and go. This was back in June. So I told him, since you want to stay here for a little bit longer, I'm basically gonna have to go to the States and take your place. So I left on July 11th, seeing all these missed calls, and then I seen, the group messaging going like bonkers. And I opened it up, and it's showing that the son of Kamil is basically missing or injured. I called up my son, my younger son, and he told me that Saif, your son, is unconscious right now, and something happened in the mountains. So I kept going back and forth, and I was like, someone tell me what's going on. No reply whatsoever. So I knew there's something more going on. Then I called my son Saif's phone, but the person that answered was not him. It was one of his friends, and he told me, he's okay, he's okay. At that moment, my son was unconscious. I was like, oh. It just gets me every time, man. It's just... What happened was that Israeli settlers ambushed these young people that were going there to the lands. They were beaten, brutally beaten. So what had happened is Saif was beaten and he started running, and all the friends kind of dispersed. And on his way down, he basically found this tree. When he reached under this tree, he kind of lost it. His eyes were open, but there was no response from them. He stayed in that state for hours because the ambulance was prevented from the Israeli soldiers to come in. When they finally reached them, because you know the terrain is kind of rough in that area, the ambulance got as close as it can. They put him on the stretcher. My younger son seen this, and he told me, you know, Dad, basically 5 minutes before he got into the ambulance is when he took his last breath. The delay of the Israeli, army delaying to get to him, the paramedics or any medical assistance, you know, it had a big impact in the killing of my son. When they were on their way to the hospital, until finally, after about 30 minutes later, he called me up, and you know, he told me, he said, Dad, you know, I don't know how to tell you, but your son was killed, and you know, Saifullah is gone. And I was like, I don't know, the hardest moment of my life, you know, because you don't expect that ever to happen to your own son, you know, like, and you're always expecting that he's gonna bury you. His whole thing was like to, like, make me proud, man. Like that was his thing. I want to make my dad proud. I don't want to disappoint him. You know, I was never disappointed, you know, in anything he did, you know. It's hard to tell me, man. It's just, because you miss him, man. 20 years old.
The Israeli settlers are a cancer to the fabric of Israeli society. What do you think about that?
Completely untrue.
Do you think that would be anti-Semitic?
No, I think it's a political opinion that some people hold.
Yeah, the former Prime Minister of Israel, actually. That was the quote of the former Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I feel
Well,
like when I tell you violence that is happening today, you try and take it back to 2,000 years ago. I'm talking about the violence.
2,000 years ago.
I'm talking about the violence happening right now in the West Bank, and especially in areas that are Territory A, that should be under full Palestinian authority. They are still being patrolled by IDF, and they are still being overran by Israeli settlers that are armed with American guns.
That's completely incorrect. So Israelis do not enter Area A, because if you enter Area A, it's punishable by Israeli law very heavily. Number one.
Well, I just want to get that quote.
Does it
Israeli settlers are not entering Area A. That's what you're saying.
They are not. They should not be. It is punishable by Israeli law. That's a big legal problem. You're not allowed to do that.
These lands are our lands. It's under Area A, not under Area B, not under Area C, which is Israeli authority. Now, these are land under Palestinian authority. These are lands that were passed down to us. And these Israeli settlers are going there since April.
What I can tell you is, you talk about settler violence, right? And the statement that you just made about them being a cancer, I completely disagree with that, and here's why. Because, again, that's a political opinion from the left, and they're entitled to it, and that's fine. I mean,
no, your former Prime Minister said that. Your former Prime Minister
said that. Israel's a Democrat country, and we're allowed to have those conflicting ideas. That's fine. That's part of the democracy. I completely disagree with that as a security professional, as somebody who's been in Judea, Samaria. A lot of our politicians, ironically, have not.
That's another sleight of hand, by the way.
Other areas.
Referring it to as Judea, Samaria as a sleight of hand that Israelis are using to not be in the same ballpark about what we're talking about. No one else refers to it as Judea, Samaria except for the Israelis.
That's incorrect. I just sat down with the ambassador of the United States, Mike Huckabee, the other day.
The biggest Zionist in the fucking room.
Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities. There's no such thing as an occupation.
Can I finish my statement?
Yes.
Because that's kind of important. I don't know. Have you sat with the ambassador of the United States ever?
Go ahead.
So, being an honored guest at the U.S. Embassy here in Jerusalem, in our meeting, we actually asked him about this very term and his staffers, and they confirmed that yes, that is a term that some of the staffers use and others use West Bank for clarity because people they get confused because they don't understand these terminologies.
So I'm here at the site because I can't get close to the area that my son was killed because I fear for my life. These Israeli settlers are armed and dangerous, and behind me is the area that my son was killed. For 3 hours, having a hard time breathing with no help.
Let's break down some of these details. Number one, can you just describe how many Israeli settlers there were, how old you think they were, and did they hit him? Did they have sticks? Did they have, describe who this group was and what they did to your son?
They have this group called the Hilltop Gang or Hilltop Clan, and they're basically going around all these areas in the West Bank and trying to claim or put outposts saying that this is their land, They had clubs that day. There was one of his friends, he just had some major ACL reconstruction. He had his whole knee busted from in, out, everywhere. He's barely walking now. There was another guy, he had his head busted with all this, I think he had 12 or 13 stitches on his head.
And what role did the IDF play in your son's death?
The IDF played a big role. Them preventing the ambulance to get to him earlier is a big cause, in leading to his murder.
So if the IDF soldiers had simply let an ambulance treat a wounded person that was attacked, good chances are today he'd be alive.
Yes, 100%.
So this would be like if an innocent man was attacked by a mob and the very police that are supposed to protect him kept the ambulance from coming.
Blocked them completely, yes.
Are IDF soldiers supposed to protect the Palestinians?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Why in this case would the
we're not supposed to. We're mainly supposed to protect Israelis.
Right. That's what happens. Yeah.
In carrying out that mission, we are also not allowed to harm others. So in other words, to avoid casualties from anybody, which would include Palestinians.
Would you consider it to be harm to block a ambulance from treating someone for over 3 hours that just got attacked by a mob of settlers?
Yeah, of course, if that's true. Yeah. How come you don't mention the killing of Benjamin Ahmair, a 14-year-old? He was killed in April 12th, 2024, during the war that we've been in. Why don't we mention, I don't know, and you said rocks isn't a big deal. If you recall in our conversation, we kind of discussed a little bit some of the talking points you wanted to cover. Well, just rocks killed Yehuda Shoam in 2001. It killed Jonathan Palmer and his son in 2011. Okay, these were people that just were commuting on the roads. It wasn't settler violence. It wasn't anything that you hear. Oh, and by the way, according to the United Nations reports that you're reading and that you're quoting to me about all the settler violence, this goes under the settler violence.
Why are you doing this for settler violence?
Because he was driving on the road. How is that settler violence? We cry for the one guy. We never talk about the other. There's two people here. In fact, there's many people here.
A few things. One, any innocent Israeli that gets killed that is a shame, and we are in agreement. However, the reason one side is more accentuated is because it's a sheer volume problem. When you have, you said 2001, 2011, 2024, there's a lot of gaps. I'm talking about almost on a daily basis. Hold on, you spoke for like 6 minutes straight. I'm gonna talk just a little bit, okay? It's the sheer volume of these things happening.
Israel ambassador Mike Huckabee tweeted at Israel, and he's a guy that's as Zionist as you can get.
Yeah.
He even tweeted at Israel that it was a murder and that there needed to be accountability for your son's death.
Yeah, it was an act of terror, he called it. It's been 6 months. There haven't been any leads to the investigation. U.S. Department of State haven't They did no investigation. The FBI didn't do an investigation, even though it's a US citizen. You know, on top of everything, me, my wife, my whole family have a security ban on us by the Israeli authorities. I can't even go through Tel Aviv airport anymore. I can't go to Ben Gurion airport anymore. I can't enter Jerusalem anymore.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Israeli settlers murdered his son, and the Israeli government responded by giving Kamo's family collective punishment. They can no longer fly into Tel Aviv, but rather have to take an extremely long route through another country to get to their land in the West Bank. Furthermore, shortly after his son's murder, he was threatened by the Israeli army that if he did not voluntarily come in for a DNA swab, that they would arrest him and kidnap him in a raid. So illegal squatters killed his son, the Israeli army blocked the ambulance from rescuing him, and yet they still continue to terrorize his family to this day. And this, folks, is textbook Israeli behavior.
Where's the accountability, let's say, for the murder of Saif Musalla?
I wasn't there. I know there's a lot of controversy on that particular incident. To my knowledge, he was up to no good. I actually get the actual report of what happened that the media did not tell, and you read the report and you're like, holy crap, it's completely different than what the media portrayed. Because the media wants a story. If it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. One of them being that you said that settler violence is overwhelmingly worse against the Palestinians. Yes, because the United Nations are the ones that they collect the information, they pump it to the media, and what they do is they fudge the numbers. They sometimes triple the number of cases where there's settler violence and or altercations with the Israeli security forces. You're looking at it from the way that you're looking at it, but I know the people that are living through it.
Do you agree with Mike Huckabee's assessment that it was a murder of Saif Musalla?
I don't agree with him because, with his statement, if you like, because it's an unprofessional statement if that's what he said.
As if your nightmare couldn't get any worse from your son getting killed, a few months ago, your nephew was brought into Israeli prison on the pretext of throwing a rock.
Yeah. They come to the door, banging on the door. My brother-in-law opened the door before they busted it because they don't give no chances. You know, they're just, you know, when they come in, he's thinking like, what the hell did I do? He's not thinking that they're coming for his 15-year-old son. They take him for allegedly throwing these rocks, take him to an Israeli military police, blindfold him, put him in handcuffs, and then that was the last time that the mother, father, brothers, sisters, anybody had any physical contact or seen him directly until the day that he was released on November 27th, I think it was.
Tell me like the bullet points of what happened to him in that 9.5 months in prison.
He got scabies. He lost 25 pounds. He said they would make cards, playing cards, from napkins. And when the guards found those, they would take it and rip it and throw it away in the garbage. They would pound on them and then, you know, give them a kick here, a kick there. Their food was so scarce, they would give him like a meal that's for one person, but they would have to divide it between 4 to 5 people. When he came out, he was so pale, man. You can just see like, this kid has no sunlight.
He turned 16 while in prison?
He turned 16 while in prison.
So he had been beaten, starved, infested by bugs,
yes,
as a 15-year-old kid.
And the scabies just stayed. Even after he got out in November, he kept on itching.
And this is an American citizen?
This is an American citizen.
Where does he live?
You know, born U.S. American citizen, from Florida also. This is Saifullah's first cousin. My wife and his mother are sisters.
Generally speaking, how are Palestinians treated in Israeli prisons? It's a known fact that before the 7th of October, things were pretty bad. But after the 7th of October, the Shabak decided to start implementing tactics, torture tactics, where they use dogs to rape people. They torture them methodically, they don't give them food, they starve them on purpose, they beat them up methodically. And mind you, this is not just for older people, this is for 14-year-old prisoners or even younger that they have to face this treatment. It's concentration camps. The Israeli prisons are pretty much concentration camps at this point.
Every day from on top of my house, I can see the Batin area, which is the area that my son was killed. But I can't get there yet. Israeli settlers are still there, armed and dangerous.
I want to know a little bit about this night patrol that you guys do every night.
لجنة حراسات سنجل شكلنا هذه لجنة الحراسات من الاعتداءات المستوطنين المستمرة في هذا البلد. طبعا احنا جماعة متطوعين من حالنا طبعا، ولا من اي مؤسسة ولا من اي حدا. تطوع من اهل بلدنا، مختارين من اهل البلد. احنا لجنة مشكلة تقريبا 200 واحد، مقسمين حالنا 4 تقسيمات لحماية أهل سنجل وأطفال سنجل ونساء سنجل وبنات سنجل. طبعا الاعتداءات مستمرة في البلد، كل يوم في اعتداء من المستوطنين.
That was the day that this night patrol started, was after my son was brutally murdered and killed by the Israeli settlers on this mountain that I cannot even reach yet. I haven't reached my land yet since that time. So hopefully this will all be solved and some accountability will come to these settlers.
Iran has been within 2 weeks of a nuclear weapon for as long as I can remember.
But at what point does especially China get more involved in the action?
If that were to happen, we're on the threshold of intercontinental nuclear exchanges. The reason we're in this war is because Israel and its Zionist billionaire supporters in the United States currently control Congress and the president.
How does the United States benefit from this conflict in any manner?
It doesn't.
Folks, as I talk to you right now, World War III might be around the corner. Missiles are flying from different countries, bombs are exploding, people are dying, things are getting serious, and I wanted to talk to somebody that can help us understand what's going on in our world. So on the show, we're having an interview with Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He served in the military for almost 30 years. He's a West Point graduate, and some people have called him one of the most innovative minds in the military today. He is joined by Zoom, so this is just a Zoom call, but I think the information is key. We could have flown to DC and done a podcast-style interview, but right now I think information that is powerful and quick is the best. So tune into this as you're working, going for a run, and learn about what's going on in our world. I'm very concerned about this battle in Iran. I'm very concerned about our alliance with Israel, and I think Colonel Macgregor fills in a lot of gaps and gives us a comprehensive understanding that only someone with almost 30 years of experience in the business can do. Tune in to Douglas Macgregor, but first, a quick word from the sponsor of today's episode. Folks, before we dive in, first a quick word from the sponsor of today's episode, Proof Wallet. Every real man needs a real wallet, and Proof delivers just that. In an age where it feels like everything is made from cheap crap, Proof does the exact opposite. They use genuine leather and aerospace grade metal to craft their wallets. This is a veteran-owned company that takes pride in craftsmanship. They have a minimalist design that you can fill up to 25 cards in here without it feeling bulky, and it also comes with RFID blocking technology that helps protect your cards from scammers. What separates Proof from the pack is their customer service. If this wallet gets lost or stolen, they replace it for free. To get one for yourself, visit go.carryproof.com/TommyG and use code TommyG for 20% off your entire order. That's right, use code TommyG for 20% off your entire order. Thank you, and back to the episode. Colonel, thank you for joining us. I know that you're getting a lot of calls right now. The first thing I want to get into is understanding why we're in this conflict in the first place, from the Trump administration's point of view, and then if it differs from your point of view as well.
Well, listen, people can go and listen to Hegseth and Trump and whatever they have to say. I'm not going to repeat that drivel. I'm going to tell you that the reason we're in this war is because Israel and its Zionist billionaire supporters in the United States currently control Congress and the president. They invested enough money to ensure that everyone on the Hill will support whatever Israel wants. And they invested enough money in Trump that he was able to be elected in 2024. Those are the facts. So we are effectively in this war to remove Iran as an obstacle to Israel's regional hegemony.
Now, if you say that to a congressperson or to someone that's in AIPAC, they're going to say that that is a conspiracy theory.
Well, it's not a theory. It's a fact. All you have to do is look at the 100+ million that have been invested in the Congress by the Zionist billionaires. Because if you just look at what AIPAC says it spends on lobbying, that's about $3 million, which is a modest sum. You have to look at the direct payments that go into political action committees to ensure the candidates are elected. You have to understand that a candidate who says they're not prepared to support whatever Israel wants knows that whoever his opponent is will then be offered the same money regardless of party, as long as he or she supports whatever Israel wants. It's a very simple process. It's worked brilliantly because they've had almost inexhaustible funds to invest. Now, all the nonsense about Israel is the first, or not Israel, but Iran is the leading state sponsor of terrorism, that's all nonsense. If you're looking for an Islamist state that sponsors terrorism, that advocates for the use of force against anyone who is not a Muslim for all intents and purposes, but certainly against Israel, against the United States and Europe, go to Pakistan. Pakistan is a world-renowned incubator of Islamist terrorists. Their madrasas, religious schools, are heavily funded by the Saudis that push this Wahhabist extremist Islam. And they very definitely fall into the category. Of course, Pakistan has nuclear weapons, which suggests that if you want to avoid being disrupted or invaded or attacked by the United States and Israel, you probably ought to invest in nuclear weapons.
Which is what they're accusing.
Iran has made it very clear that they will not build a nuclear weapon. That was declared an impossibility almost 20 years ago by the man who is now dead, the former supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. We decided on the basis of Israeli propaganda and direction to say that we don't believe them and they're lying. You've got to go back and look at Mr. Netanyahu's record as a good example over many, many decades. Iran has been within 2 weeks of a nuclear weapon for as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
Iran is a terrorist and wants to kill everyone who is not a Muslim. It's all nonsense. We forget that, for instance, this man, Soleimani, who was the leader of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps back in 2005 and 2006, was instrumental in taking the Shiite population led by the famous mullah, whose name escapes me at this point, out of the fight so that Petraeus could pay off the Sunnis and the Shiites would stop fighting to allow for some measure of stability to put in a government. And that government turned out to be pro-Iranian under Mr. Maliki. People have forgotten that. Then Mr. Soleimani came back into the country to organize the Iraqi Shiite militias to fight against ISIS, whom we declared to be our enemy, and Al-Qaeda, and Al-Nusra, and all these Sunni Islamist organizations. They were aligned with us. And Soleimani actually went into Syria with these Shiite militias and liberated Christian and Druze and other towns occupied by Armenians and Georgians and so forth. We murdered him. That was our gratitude for his good work, because Israel wanted him dead, because he was opposing everything Israel wanted to achieve. What I'm trying to tell you is that we've just got lie after lie after lie after lie spewing out of people's mouths. And, you know, I keep telling people, and they listen in Europe, they listen in the Middle East, and they certainly listen in India. If you want to stop Islamist terrorism, the first place you look is Pakistan, not Iran. And I am not advocating war with Pakistan. I'm just trying to expose the fiction that people are repeating ad nauseum.
So as it stands right now, it appears 3 different U.S. military bases have been taken out. The Burj Khalifa has gotten hit by a drone or a missile. We've bombed a school in Iran where school children are dead. Apparently, Trump has sunk up to 9 Iranian naval ships. What do you make of the carnage so far, and where do you predict it's going to go?
Well, actually, the Iranians have destroyed 27 bases in the region.
27 now.
27. They actually attacked our air base in Kirlik, Turkey, which has been a key hub for U.S. air power across the entire region for decades. And that is no longer usable. We also need to remember that when we say destroy, it doesn't take much to damage an airstrip or airstrips. In other words, to render many of these bases inoperable is not difficult. Now, the 5th Fleet's base has been utterly and completely destroyed, seriously pulverized by multiple missiles. In many other cases, they've used relatively cheap, inexpensive drones that our air defenses have failed to shoot down. And when I say ours, I'm talking about the air defenses we established in UAE and other Gulf states using Patriot missiles and so forth. Of course, Patriot missile, if you fire it at 2 or 3 drones, is a pretty bad exchange rate, because you're spending millions of dollars to shoot down a couple of $100,000 worth of equipment. But they've managed to also damage all the port facilities that we have historically used, even port facilities in Oman. And we were building a port facility in Oman that was supposed to replace the one we've been using in Dubai. And the reason for that was very understandable. We were looking at the vulnerability of the port facilities, and we needed someplace else where we could reload Tomahawk missiles and strike missiles from the Navy, the whole SM family. Right now, we've lost all of those. And the impact on our logistical infrastructure is huge, because you're talking about having to fall all the way back to ports in India or ports in Europe, because you can't use the ports that are in the Middle East. And then beyond those that have been destroyed or damaged, most of the countries in the Middle East have now turned away from us. And I think that's going to be the future. If I were going to predict the future right now, I think we will be swept completely out of the Middle East by the time this war ends. We will be finished in the region.
Do you predict this being a short-term conflict or something that is going to be long-term and ongoing?
I think this is going to go on for weeks, maybe months. We just don't know. Remember when we started the Kosovo conflict, the bombing campaign, that was supposed to last, as I recollect, 2 to 3 days, maybe a week, 2 weeks at most. Well, it lasted for 78 days. And the bombing campaign did not drive the Serbs out of Kosovo. We sent Strobe Talbot to Moscow, and he cut a deal, as President Trump would say, with the leadership in Moscow that agreed that they would tell the Serbs that they could not provide them with food, fuel, and medicine through the winter. And at that point, Milosevic, who was then the widely demonized leader of Yugoslavia or Serbia, recognized that he had to get the troops out because he didn't want to watch several 100,000 of his countrymen starve or freeze to death in the winter, because we bombed all the energy grids, all the heating plants, and so forth. This time around, you're in a somewhat different position, because you have an enemy that is far better armed with much more modern technology than anything we faced in Serbia in 1999. And thus far, the Iranians seem to be doing very, very well. I think their next step is to essentially eliminate all the air and ground facilities in Israel for the Israeli armed forces, and force the Israelis to essentially fight from the ground without having much access to launch aircraft.
Do you think Israel is going to get absolutely pounded over the next few days?
I think it has been already, and it's going to continue nonstop. I'm told that President Trump actually sent a message over the weekend to the Iranians offering them an opportunity to negotiate. And they said not only no, but hell no. And I think they've had it with us, because once again, this latest attack did not begin with us. And we need to back up a little bit. I've been saying for months, ever since the 12-day war ended, that this would recommence. In other words, the war between Israel and Iran and us would recommence. I thought it would happen just before Christmas. It didn't. Then it became clear that it was probably going to happen in January. We saw these demonstrations, which were grossly inflated in their importance. We lied about what had happened over there, arguing that tens of thousands are being killed, which is a lot of nonsense, including, large numbers of police. Well, ultimately what happened is that they did kill the demonstrators, about 400 policemen, but we know that that happened because the Mossad was on the ground with weapons and passed them out and urged people to shoot them, paid people to shoot them in some cases. And the demonstrations were not about overthrowing the government. They were protests about the sad state of the economy, largely as a consequence of our sanctions. And the government didn't disagree with them and said, we're doing everything we can. And they were negotiating a deal or a loan with China for $1 billion to boost the economy. As it turned out, all the killing made that impossible, but only about 3,000 people were killed. Some were jailed, but what we told was a lie at the time about what was going on. But I think the lie was actually believed in the White House. And I think President Trump actually thought, well, this is the moment we should be prepared to attack. But it was shut down so dramatically, particularly after the Iranians discovered, thanks to Chinese and Russian intelligence, where the 40,000 Starlight terminals were that the Mossad had smuggled into the country for use by their agents and the opposition. Once those were shut down and they eliminated most of the agents or the ringleaders, then it all ended. Right now, the only demonstrations we've seen since that time, and including yesterday, involve millions of people demonstrating support for the government. So I think it should be pretty clear now that what President Trump expected at the time wasn't real. Now, we heard from Mr. Witkoff quite recently that he, in private with Mr. Trump, concluded that it was very strange to them that the Iranians had not capitulated simply on the basis of assembling all of the American military power. And he said, whoa, why? We thought they were going to submit. You begin to wonder who the hell is really in charge. And I think we know who that is. That's Netanyahu. And Witkoff and friends are all surrogates for Netanyahu. Utterly false assumption about how the Iranians think or how they would behave. Iran will not submit to Israeli Jewish supremacy over the region. They won't do it. They won't submit to it over them. And I think they are now increasingly going to be backed by most of the region. And we are desperate. I think Trump called this inaccurately. I'm not sure what kind of advice he got. I doubt seriously he listened to anybody that told him about the limitations on our missiles, how many we had, how many we could produce to replace the ones we shot, and so forth. And I think he also failed to listen to people that told him what we could do from the sea and what we can't do from the sea. The outcome is now a war that is just dragging on without any end in sight.
Can you go on a little bit more about the miscalculations you suspect this Trump White House has made in this conflict and how that could result?
I'm told that we have something in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 5,000 missiles in the region right now. Many of those are Tomahawk, some are Standard missiles. Against that, you have 250,000 missiles on the Iranian side. There are many different categories, and the numbers are different in each, but the point is they have vastly more missiles than we do. And remember, they're a continental power. That means they're a land power. Their logistical supply chain is very short. Their manufacturing facilities are all underground, and they're continuing to turn out missiles. They also had the Chinese deliver many hundreds of missiles over the last few weeks. And these missiles are very accurate, very lethal. They're compatible with the launchers that the Iranians have. So I think there was a tendency to brush that aside. I think they thought that the Iranian air and missile defenses would fail completely. Well, actually speaking, they're starting to perform finally better than they have in the past. And I think that that's enough to deter people from entering Iranian airspace. The one area where I'm told that we have actually crossed into Iran, along with the Israelis, is up near Tabriz in the very northwest corner of the country. So the point is, I think we've misjudged. We've misjudged our production capacity, our ability to keep up. We keep forgetting that for every missile that's incoming, you fire 2 or 3 to try and knock it down. We have not kept up with the technological developments that they have achieved in Iran. One of their newer missiles that's had great success deploys a dozen or so decoys. And while the various anti-missile missiles are being fired in Israel or by us, the real missiles that are the real dangerous ones that you want to try and stop penetrate. In other words, they have gamed this very effectively, and their penetrations have been effective. And they've used cheap, inexpensive drones wherever possible, and they've managed to essentially shut down the economy in the United Arab Emirates, shut down Bahrain, shut down Kuwait, shut down Qatar. These are not minor matters because India does billions and billions and billions of dollars of business through Dubai, through the UAE. 18% of the economy in the United Arab Emirates is tied up with aviation. Right now, no one can land or take off. I mean, I could keep going down the list, and you've seen what's happened with oil. Oil is spiking. Remember, capital always flees conflict and crisis and migrates to stability. We've destroyed stability. We've destroyed confidence in the staying power of the Emirates and I think Saudi Arabia. I'm told just before I came on here that a refinery in Saudi Arabia is on fire. If they start destroying refineries and oil infrastructure, and I think that's what's going to happen, it's going to have a terrible impact. It's going to take years to recover from this. And the Iranians have no incentive, none whatsoever, to believe anything we say. We've lied to them repeatedly. And the way this war started, actually, according to Secretary of State Rubio, he spoke to the so-called Group of Eight yesterday. He apparently said, well, you know, the Israelis got this started, and we decided we'd go ahead and join in. In other words, this was not a carefully coordinated, orchestrated beginning. And what were they able to do? They were able to kill the supreme leader. Well, what happens when you fire a CEO? You get a new one. You know, we need to wake up. This is not a personality cult in Iran. This is a real modern state. They have ample succession procedures in place. One commander replaces another based on the casualties. This is not some backward sultanate in the Middle Ages that you lose the sultan and everyone falls apart. So I think all of the assumptions we made about Iran at this point are wrong. Now, the real question is this. What else can we do? Well, one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to persuade the Kurds that control much of Syria and parts of northern Iraq to invade Iran on the ground. We're telling them, if you do this, we will help you build your own state. Now, guess who the source for that information is that was captured through signal intelligence? The Turks. Now, if you're a Turk, how do you feel about a Kurdish state emerging in the region that aspires to take almost a third of your country? And just a few weeks ago, we had a situation where a group of Kurds, about 400 of them, armed to the teeth, were organized and sent into action to cross the Iranian border by the Israelis, by the Mossad. The Turks informed the Iranians of this, and the Iranians annihilated the 400. So I think what you're going to see now increasingly is greater cooperation between Turkey and Iran. Turkey has the largest army in NATO. Turkey is a modern state with modern armed forces. And the Turks are already very unhappy about what the Israelis have done in Syria. The Israelis have taken much of southern Syria and continue to push towards Damascus. So I guess what I'm saying is that we are now looking around for other ways to attack Iran. Is that evidence for success with the air and missile strikes? I don't think so.
One thing that I'm very curious about is, so it seems like this is going to have very big ramifications on the world oil market. And two beneficiaries of Iran's oil market is Russia and China. At what point do the bigger superpowers join this fight? I know that China is supplying weapons and planes right now, but at what point does especially China get more involved in the action, do you think?
Well, right now, to compensate for the 2.7 million barrels of oil a day that India receives from the Persian Gulf, the Indians are buying oil from Russia. China is buying oil from Russia. Japan is buying oil from Russia. So I think we can say at this point that this is a bonanza financially for Russia. They're making more money than they've ever made from the oil and natural gas market. They have a new pipeline, straight into China. And they are doubling down to pipe as much oil and natural gas into China as possible to compensate for at least a temporary loss of oil and gas from the Persian Gulf, because China gets roughly a third of all of its oil and gas from the Persian Gulf. However, we should point out that China stored up a great deal of oil and gas. In other words, they have reserves, and they built those reserves up against the very high probability that this would be cut off by us. So I think, at least for the moment, Russia and China are fine. The rest of us, not so good. Europe in particular is in serious trouble because we destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline, and we insisted the Europeans not take oil and natural gas from Russia. So they followed suit. They're not taking oil and natural gas from Russia. Now they've lost their access to oil and natural gas from the Middle East. So what do you do in Europe? Well, I guess you wait for the summer. You may not be able to do any work at night because you won't have any electricity. You know, look, what I'm trying to illustrate is that everything we have done has been done in a vacuum. We have ignored the interests of our friends and allies. You know, we don't care what happens to the Turks. We don't care what happens to the Indians. We don't care what happens to the Europeans. The only thing we seem to care about is Israel.
How does the United States benefit from this conflict in any manner?
It doesn't. You know, that was my point. If I'm projecting into the future, I think that by the time this is over, we'll be finished in the region. Nobody's going to invite us back in to build bases. Why would you want a base that belongs to the United States inside your country? Did we protect these bases? No, we couldn't. So what's happened to the bases? They're destroyed. What's happened to other facilities on the ground in these various places across the Middle East? They're being destroyed. So I don't see much evidence that we're going to be welcome there much longer. In fact, if you're sitting in Korea right now and you're already fed up with the way we've been treating them, and you want to get us out of your country, but you're too polite to say, please leave, I think the South Koreans are going to look at the situation and decide, look, these Americans haven't been very successful at protecting anybody. They can't protect their own bases. They certainly can't protect the Israelis. So just why do we have the Americans in South Korea? Because we don't expect an attack from North Korea. And right now, South Korea's largest trading partner is China. And the Chinese don't like North Korea. Nobody likes North Korea. You don't buy anything from North Korea. North Korea doesn't build anything to sell to anybody. So what would the Chinese like to do? They would like to see South Korea ultimately take ownership of North Korea. But that's impossible as long as we are on the peninsula. But people say, well, wait a minute, the Chinese want to invade South Korea. No, they don't. Why? Why would they do that? The same thing is true with Taiwan. For God's sakes, they don't want a war over Taiwan. A war with Taiwan would destroy business, destroy the economy. There's no value in seizing control of Taiwan. They've made it very clear the only way that they end up invading Taiwan is if we put missiles and troops on Taiwan. Sound familiar? So, you know, the world has changed. It's 80 years since the end of the Second World War. People are still running around saying, well, if the Iranians get the nuclear bomb, they'll attack us right away. No, they won't. But that's good Israeli Jewish propaganda. That's designed to buttress support for this war to destroy Iran. And remember, what's the war about? Have you looked at the Greater Israel Project? Have you seen the map? The map takes Sinai. It takes part of northern Egypt. It seizes part of Jordan. It seizes most or half of Syria as a minimum, part of Iraq, northern Saudi Arabia. This is what we're fighting for?
So it seems like this is a battle that is supposed to help Israel become a world superpower while depleting the United States, which it doesn't seem like Israel has any objectives that align with helping us. It's more so they're using us as the big bully to help do what they want in the neighborhood.
Of course. And since they've got control of Congress and the White House, who's to stop them?
So I think it brings up some interesting questions of free speech I know that Colonel Nathan McCormick, was recently let go for saying that he doesn't want to fight for the Israeli death cult and suggesting that the United States is Israel's proxy. There's also rumors that the USS Gerald R. Ford is sabotaging its plumbing because they don't want to fight the war for Israel. I don't know if you have any sources on that, but if a soldier refuses an order because they don't want to die for Israel, what are the ramifications for that soldier?
Well, first, I can't confirm any of what you said except the first point. We know about that individual, and he expressed his views, and I don't think he's the Lone Ranger. Mm-hmm. But I think most everyone else, having served in the regular army for 28 years after West Point, is going to follow orders unless you are asked to commit an atrocity. Now, where do you draw the line? Well, I certainly would not assist the Israelis in their program of mass murder and deportation of Palestinians from Gaza or the West Bank. It's off the table. And if I were sitting in the Senate or the House, I would insist that we stop aiding and supporting Israel as long as it pursues those policies. I mean, to me, that just makes sense based upon the things we say we stand for in the United States. But as far as the rest of it is concerned, I think it's always important that the soldier in the field, sailor, airman, or Marine, feels that he is acting in the interests of the American people. It's become increasingly difficult to make that argument. We made that argument in Vietnam, and it was always a lie. We've made the argument in many other settings, and it was not necessarily true. Now, in 1990, that argument was made, but there were limitations on the application of American military power. And that limitation at the time was we are not marching into Iraq with the goal of changing Iraq and regime change. We simply said we're ejecting the Iraqi military from Kuwait. Now, some of us think that we should have done more than we did, but nonetheless, those were the limitations. And I think that went well. It went rather easily compared with everybody's expectation. But then again, we had generals that hadn't been to war since the 1960s. And they saw Vietnam, and that was a very different setting. Right now, I think most Americans in uniform and out of uniform are looking at this, and they're asking some of these questions. But I don't think the majority are asking them and expecting immediate answers. So I think, sadly, this will have to drag on for some period of time. And if it drags on and we get some number of Americans killed, and by some number, 500 at a shot, 1,000 at a shot, something like that, some mass casualty event, it will be much harder for this administration to make an argument for a long-term strategic conflict.
Do you think that Trump can be impeached for not getting congressional approval to go into this war in the first place?
Well, I think that's possible, but I think that's kind of a joke. It's an exercise in extraordinary hypocrisy. The only time the Democrats stood up and gave a standing ovation to Donald Trump during the State of the Union speech was when he talked about attacking Iran. Gee, I wonder why. Everybody's on the payroll. Everybody's getting their check in the mail. So they all stood up and, yes, let's go get Iran. I mean, sorry about that. It's depressing. So if they do that, it's just an exercise in hypocrisy. They've failed the American people themselves. It's their obligation to exercise their constitutional duty. They haven't done it.
If you were to hear from the Department of War, our Navy is the strongest, most powerful, most tremendous. What do you think is the true state of the U.S. Navy right now? And how do we stand to fight in this war?
Well, we have 3 more carrier battle groups. And as I understand it, they are being prepared to surge to the Middle East. If they do, they will not all be at full strength, and they will not all be adequately prepared. Now, I think we have 11 carriers. We have 2 carrier battle groups right now, one in the Mediterranean and one down in the Indian Ocean. These other 3, I don't know where they are precisely. But I think the point is the Navy is not in good shape. And that has been a problem for some time because the admirals refuse to let go of the Cold War paradigm. We keep ships at sea long, long beyond the limits that are normal and are necessary. We patrol seas and oceans where there is nothing. We don't need to be there. We have satellite-based overhead intelligence, terrestrial intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance. We don't need to be everywhere as we have been in the past. And as a result, you have a Navy that's worn out. The equipment is worn out, and people in many cases are not adequately trained. They haven't had time to train. So I think there are serious problems, morale, training, and discipline in the Navy. Now, how about the rest of the force? It's a mixed picture. I think the Air Force probably has the least difficulties, but that has to do with their lifestyle and the way they operate. Whereas the Army and the Marines, I think they have their share of problems as well. Now, we have had recruiting difficulties, in large part because people were tired of rotating in and out of these forward operating bases where they saw no particular mission. So I think there are a lot of problems, and we keep pretending that we are so, I listened to President Trump say, well, I rebuilt it during the last administration, and now our military is greater than ever. He doesn't have any idea. Trump is a marketing genius. He got where he did in business because he was very good at persuading people, to invest in him, to believe him. He's carried that over into politics, but the substance is lacking. Things are not quite as he describes them.
Colonel, you even wrote books on the subject of how the military can innovate. People have called you one of the most innovative thinkers of how the military could change. What would you prescribe for the country right now? If you became benevolent dictator, how would you handle Iran, and what would you do with our military?
Well, the first thing is I wouldn't have attacked Iran. I think it's a very stupid idea. It's always a dumb idea for a maritime or aerospace power, or in our case, we're both a maritime and aerospace power, to attack a land power, or what we call a continental power. Why? Continental powers are very large. They have strategic depth. In other words, they can fall back into their interior. They're harder to reach, especially when they have large populations. 93 million is a large population. And they have a very large pool of young men who can serve in the Iranian armed forces. That's helpful. The Turks do as well. In fact, I think both Iran and Turkey, 50 or 60% of the population is under the age of 30. That's a very fortuitous position to be in militarily. So, what are we really? We're very much like the British Empire before 1914. We sail in or we fly in, and when things go our way, we stay and try to exploit the opportunity for money. When things don't go our way, we sail home, we fly home. We stayed in Vietnam until it became impossible for us to stay there. What did we do? We sailed away, we flew away. We don't live in the Eastern Hemisphere. We don't live on the Asian continent. We don't live in Europe. We don't live in Africa. We don't live in Latin America. So, whatever we do is temporary. It's not an enduring impact. What we do is we disturb the dynamic for some period of time, we try to profit from it, and then we leave. This is the problem, though, in the modern world. That old model of profiting, which was really a form of imperialism, doesn't work. And it's a loser, especially if you're trying to hold territory. My point is this. We need to leave the world to its own devices. We need to focus here at home. We need to treat the rest of the world not as an enemy, just as a normal person would treat another normal person. But we should also look at states as potential strategic partners depending on circumstances. I like to call relations between nations limited liability partnerships. You cooperate together when it makes sense to do so. But you don't set up alliances that are supposed to be permanent, that bind small states to us or bind us to them. In other words, work together when you can, but it doesn't necessarily mean that our interests align perfectly. One of the major crusades of the Israeli state and its supporters in the United States has been to create the illusion that whatever Israel's interests are and whomever Israel fights is somehow or another our enemy, and it's in our interest to be part of it. That's not true. We don't really have an interest in war with Iran. We never have. You know, and if you go back, and we need to pause and discuss this for just a minute. If you go back to Sam Huntington's work on Clash of Civilizations and some of his other works before that, Political Order in Changing Societies. Pardon me, I used to teach this stuff at West Point. One of the points that he made repeatedly was of all the Islamic states in the world, Iran was by far the most enlightened, the most advanced, with the highest human capital, and most likely to become part of the growing modern world. That is still true today. But this propaganda machine over the last 30 years has worked overtime to convince everyone in the United States who watches Fox News or CNN or ABC or MSNBC or NBC or whatever, and the 6 oligarchs, Zionist billionaires who control all the media corporations, have tried repeatedly to reinforce this enemy picture or perception of Iran. It's worked. We're finally at war with Iran. And we got a problem. First of all, we don't really think we can win it, contrary to whatever Donald Trump says publicly. Secondly, we don't know how to end it. Especially if ending it means we have to admit that we can't win.
How do you think this goes for Israel in the sense that maybe they're a little bit in over their head? They have this mentality that it's us versus the world. Everyone wants us wiped out. We're willing to use the ultimate force, a nuclear weapon. Could this get escalated into something extremely serious?
Yes, that is the greatest danger of all. I think the Russians and the Chinese will stay on the sidelines for the moment. But as it becomes clear that we can't win and the Iranians can't lose, they will become more engaged, probably with us. Initially behind closed doors, and then more so publicly if it becomes necessary. The Israelis, fearing exactly this development, may well decide to use a nuclear weapon in order to stop the Iranians from flattening their country with missiles. Because what they don't want to do is admit defeat. So then in desperation, turn to a nuclear weapon. If that were to happen, we're on the threshold of intercontinental nuclear exchanges. We don't know where it'll go. We don't know how bad it can get. I hope that President Trump has given some thought to this possibility, because he, more than anyone else, would have to personally intervene to stop it.
So essentially, unless we sort of divorce ourselves from this Israel cult thinking, things will not be good for us going forward in the future.
Well, you can't divorce yourself at the moment. We're in too deep. But the most that you can do is turn to the Israelis and say stop when the time comes. And that won't be for a little while. I think we have 10 days to 2 weeks of missiles. That's it.
What comes after? As far as what we have left in our arsenal.
Yeah, and the Israelis have less than that.
And what happens after that?
Well, that's the question. Do you finally admit this is a loss? Do you admit that you can't win? Do you turn to Moscow or Beijing or both and ask them to mediate? Better would be to turn to India. India is neutral, and India has good relations with Iran historically. It's also had good relations with Israel and us and Russia, and it has its moments with China, but not to the point where it's hopelessly hostile. Maybe India could mediate some sort of end to this disaster. But it's too soon. We're going to push this to the nth degree. It'll be pushed to as far as we can go before we stop. And then your other scenario will come into play, by the way, and that is Congress will suddenly say, this is a disaster, Donald Trump. It's all of your making. And in reality, they were as deeply involved in bringing on this war as anyone. Then the American people are going to decide whether or not they think they have a legitimate government anymore. Since the polling was 70 to 85% against the war. And if we had put this to a referendum, I doubt seriously we would be at war right now.
Colonel, I know you're probably booked all day doing hits like this. I very much appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to our Pentagon piece coming out. So thank you for joining us. One request, if you could keep the link open once we hang up this call. So
yeah, sure, absolutely. The other thing is I urge people to go to my Substack, McGregor Warrior Substack, and I've got a piece there. It's really about how long will this last and how will it end? It'll go into greater detail than we were able to in the short time we were talking, okay?
Yes, and you'll have a link to your latest book in the description as well.
Okay.
We appreciate your time, and we will be in touch, okay?
Super. Thanks very much.
Take
Israel is essential to the security of Jews worldwide.
America has never flinched from its commitment to the state of Israel.
America and Israel have a special friendship.
I gotta be careful the way I say this. They're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there, okay? There are some serious questions here, Patrick.
What's your reaction to seeing those photos?
Horrific. Last week, they even went to a point further than starvation called famine, worst food hunger you can get into.
Wow. Highest number of child amputees worldwide. I mean, it's just sickening that we're doing this to kids. What crime did they commit? We gave Netanyahu a blank check.
Would it be your impression that many of our politicians are under Israeli influence?
That's such a mild way to put it.
Mainstream media is been taken over by extremist groups. Most of what you see is either AI or footage used from Syria.
The IDF commanders we spoke to said they are the most ethical army in the world. They're the most precise.
That's complete bullshit.
I do know that Hamas would have their weapons depots under hospitals.
There's a reason that Hamas operates out of schools and hospitals.
With Israel being questioned now more than ever, I went to Washington, D.C. to investigate the claim of whether Israel is our greatest ally and looked in particular into the influence of AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, on our elected officials. And we also examined the war in Gaza, asking whether Israel truly lives up to its claim as the world's most ethical army, or whether we are witnessing serious human rights violations funded in part by our U.S. tax dollars. To look into this, I spoke with U.S. senators like Ron Johnson and Rand Paul, with IDF soldiers, a Jewish woman turned anti-Zionist, and one of the greatest conspiracy researchers of our era, Ian Carroll. I asked the questions that are scary to ask, and I do so as a proud American. Let's get to it.
So this is one of the scariest pieces that we ever worked on, and it's crazy as a journalist that you have to be afraid to ask questions or investigate the truth. So let's just start off with some ballpark statements. I'm not anti-Semitic. I hope all Israelis and Jewish people around the world are happy, healthy, and thriving, as I do for other people as well. It's possible that I'm going to be called anti-Semitic from doing this video, and that's not true. I don't hate anybody. There's not one person in this world I hate, and you can't tell me I do. What is the point of having a platform if you're not going to do something that's absolutely necessary, which I believe this is? So what we're going to do is use very American principles, which is questioning the narrative, questioning our government, and questioning foreign governments. We're allowed to do that. People have died for that right, and people will continue to die to fight for that right. So this is to freedom of speech. This is to investigation. Now, folks, let's jump into the video. You got arrested right around here.
Well, inside in the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee chambers.
You're a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah.
Ex-Green Beret.
Yep.
serve this country.
25 years.
What was that like getting arrested?
It felt right.
This is Anthony Aguilar. He served as a U.S. Special Forces soldier for over 20 years, and after the horrific things he witnessed as a mercenary manning the aid stations in Gaza, he has decided to come forth as a whistleblower, sounding the alarm for what he says are massive human rights violations. Here's what he had to say.
There are some members of our Congress, in the Senate and the House, that are compromised by a foreign government. I don't know what the compromise is, whether it's, pictures of them doing something embarrassing, if it's money, if it's promise of a few, like, hey, we back you for this next position. I don't know what it is.
Folks, the Israel-Palestine conflict stretches back generations, but for today's episode, we will be focusing on the past 2 years. Let's rewind back to October 7th, 2023, when Hamas executed what's widely regarded as the worst terrorist attack in Israeli history. A coordinated operation used rocket barrages, motorized armed paragliders, and foot soldiers that swept through Israel, killing approximately 1,200 Israelis and taking around 250 hostage. Similar to how Americans responded to 9/11, Israel reacted to the horrific carnage by mounting a full-scale military operation, with their main objectives being to rescue Israeli hostages, eliminate Hamas military and leadership, and prevent Hamas from ever again being able to threaten Israel. As of late, some people have begun questioning the Israeli official narrative of October 7th.
Was there a stand-down order?
According to IDF testimony from the Knesset, the legislative body of Israel, IDF soldiers claim they were told to stand down from patrol on the morning of the attack. Adding fuel to the controversy, Netanyahu's right-wing coalition voted against having a state-run inquiry into October 7th, despite polls reporting that roughly 70% of Israelis wanted one. That has helped spark conspiracy theories suggesting Israeli intelligence may have had prior knowledge of the attack. After all, Mossad is widely regarded as the best intelligence agency on the planet, and the level of surveillance they had over Gaza is incredible.
Are there IDF soldiers that are purposely targeting civilians and just kind of willy-nilly shooting people?
So willy-nilly shooting, yes. The IDF utilize machine gun fire, shooting machine guns, shooting bullets at people to control the crowd.
An Israeli newspaper report saying that soldiers were ordered to shoot at unarmed civilians waiting for food aid in Gaza.
I experienced that with a young boy named Amir in distribution site number 3. And this young boy, without shoes, who had walked 10 to 12 kilometers, and when he came up and he got meager scraps from the ground, not a box of food, not a meal, he came and thanked us. He and others were killed. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has come forward with a press release last week where they showed, oh, this young boy that Mr. Aguilar said he saw on this date, we scoured the earth and we found him, and here he is. The boy that they featured in that is not the boy that I saw on the 28th of May.
So it's propaganda.
It is propaganda. They are lying.
Now, GHF, the organization running the aid station that Anthony worked with, came out with a statement refuting Anthony's testimony by poking holes in at least one aspect of his story. They say the kid that Anthony claimed had died, a little 8-year-old boy named Abdul, is actually alive and well, and they have video proof of it, and therefore we should believe none of Anthony's testimony. However, let's also share Anthony's side of the story. He would make the case that unfortunately the lead reporter investigating whether the kid was actually alive or not, Mohammed Salama, was killed in an airstrike by the IDF when the Nasser hospital was bombed live on camera multiple times. This horrific bombing of one of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza showed aid workers and journalists being killed. When asked about this, both our politicians and IDF soldier contacts maintained that the aid workers and journalists were Hamas. Here's the footage of the men who died in the airstrikes. Tell me in the comments if you think they are Hamas.
So my name is Doron Kedar. I'm a sergeant major in the Israeli Defense Forces, today in reserves.
This is Doron Kedar. He is an IDF veteran of 20 years, and he is currently serving as a Special Forces reservist. He is the host of the Doron Kedar podcast and a strong voice advocating for the Israeli perspective.
Mainstream media is been taken over by extremist groups from the far left, wokeism, Islamist groups, socialist groups, Marxist groups.
In my experience speaking with IDF soldiers and pro-Israeli politicians, there seems to be a common playbook when it comes to tackling any criticisms of Israel. In my conversations with these guys, I've been called an anti-Semite, a Jew hater, told I've been thinking like a Nazi, and even accused of bearing responsibility for the horrible attack recently in Manchester, simply for asking questions that I think most of us have. But folks, I am a lover of all people, Israelis included, and these smears will not stop me from questioning what I see.
Most of what you see is either AI or footage used from Syria and or Iraq and or other countries.
What do you think the true number of dead civilians is?
That is probably looking more at maybe 20%, maybe 30%.
By war standards, it's still pretty
pretty darn high, right?
No, the opposite. What they will tell you is that Israel's ratio for civilian to combatant is actually much lower than the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Basically, our ratio has been 1 combatant to maybe 2 civilians.
The case Doran is making here is that the numbers out there that were allegedly leaked within Israel are actually false, and the civilian casualty rates are not so horrible, and that these numbers are fabricated by woke/Hamas-influenced media. So we sat down with Dr. Aziz Rahman, a man in Milwaukee that actually volunteered at Nasser Hospital in Gaza for 2 weeks, and we hear what he saw boots on the ground.
Dr. Aziz Rahman, I practice here in Wisconsin. Yeah, I was in June 2025. I was in Gaza at Nasser Hospital, which is in Khan Yunis, which is in the south of Gaza. Probably saw thousands of patients. I probably treated hundreds of patients. I actually did surgeries myself on maybe 50 to 75 patients.
The IDF commanders we spoke to said they are the most ethical army in the world, they're the most precise, that the minimal amount of civilian casualties are being expended with them. What would you say to that?
That's complete bullshit.
This is Brendan from the organization Open Secrets. His group is a nonpartisan watchdog that tracks the money flowing through politics, and he helps me break down the numbers connected to AIPAC. What is AIPAC, and how do they function?
They make contributions to candidates. A traditional PAC they are able to make contributions directly to candidates. They collect money from their members or other people who are interested in their cause and support their policies, and then they deliver it to the candidates.
There are members of our Congress that are compromised. That is a fact. Those that are compromised because they get the backing of AIPAC and they get the backing of Israel, their voices are amplified. You can't fight against that propaganda machine. It's huge.
So there's this Israeli commando I've been talking to, and I've talked on the phone with before, and he was going to consider doing an interview, and then he said it's pointless. Everyone just turning into an empire of Nazis pushed by Nick Fuentes, Kanye West, Candace Owens, and more.
The first problem is that every American moron retard wants to talk about, and I even say this to people, it's always, oh, you're taking my tax money. Shut the f up, dude. You don't know where the f your tax money is. You wouldn't even know where your tax money is, where you don't even read any of the bills. You sign all the bills and then you want to pay more tax for gas. You want to do all this bullshit. But then when something big happens in the world, that's where my tax money is going. Shut the f up. Nobody knows where the f their tax money is going.
Ian Carroll is one of the internet's top conspiracy analysts. His critics label him an anti-Semite spreading false information about Israel, but to others he is a fearless journalist that speaks on what some perceive as an extremely strong Zionist pressure on our government. Here's what he had to say.
There are 100 U.S. senators. Last year, 93 out of 100 U.S. senators were people whose campaigns had been funded by Israel, AIPAC, and the Israel lobby. 93 out of 100 U.S. senators were taking money from a group that represents a foreign government and foreign interests in order to operate our government on behalf of someone else. And they all work here, in this building.
This is Representative Ro Khanna from California, and he does not take AIPAC money according to the website Track AIPAC. Here's what he had to say.
It's too much. I mean, it's too much. All these super PACs and PACs are too much. I don't take a dime of PAC money, lobbyist money, since I've been in Congress. And I don't believe in super PACs. And so I can vote my conscience. But if you have people who have a particular point of view, in AIPAC's case, they're basically whatever Netanyahu does is right. That's their point of view. And they're saying, okay, if you don't take that view, we may come after you. We may have millions of dollars spent against you.
Now, ask any American content creator what the scariest subject to cover is, and the answer is Israel. Even YouTubers I know who support Israel say their channels were shadow banned for months after covering them. And folks, the plot around free speech thickens. News just broke that Larry Ellison, co-founder of Oracle, will be buying TikTok, a platform where young people can freely exchange unfiltered ideas. No Israel connection here, right? Wrong. Ellison is one of the IDF's largest private donors, giving the army tens of millions of dollars through Friends of the IDF a nonprofit that brands itself as a non-political, non-military organization, but somehow also is the official U.S. partner of Israel's soldiers. Is it hard to trace who's getting money from AIPAC and how much?
It's pretty straightforward. You can tell, if their PAC makes a contribution to a candidate must report that and must report where it came from.
Can we see some of the numbers, like to what level AIPAC is funding our politicians?
AIPAC would fall under what we call ideology single issue. So these are, groups that are focused in on particular issues.
So this is the top contributors for 2023, 2024.
Yes.
So it's fair to say that actually the left was much more heavily funded across the board, and that if you break it down further to AIPAC, it was about, 25 million to the Democrats and about 17 million to the Republicans.
And you might have been wondering, who are all these senators that are taking money from the Israel lobby? Well, if you wanted a list of all-timers, our boy Joe Biden would be at the very top with 4.2 million during his career. But you'd also find Hillary Clinton, 2.3 million. You'd find Kamala Harris, 2.3 million. You might think, oh, Trump's not on there. No, that's just because he was never a senator. So you'd have to go to a different webpage to find that number.
So would someone like Miriam Adelson appear on a list like this?
Yes.
I'm curious what her figures are, because I've seen that it reported allegedly that between 100 million and 200 million plus to Trump from the Adelson family.
She was, in 2024, she was the number 3 donor, behind Musk and Mellon.
Miriam and Sheldon would come into the White House probably almost more than anybody.
The Adelsons are some of the wealthiest Jewish billionaires in the world. Now it is the Adelson, it's just Miriam. Her husband Sheldon died. They have a long, wealthy relationship with Donald Trump, a very long and wealthy relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as with anyone and everyone else that is associated with the Zionist project and Jewish causes.
This is Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina, and according to Track AIPAC, she's taken about $130,000 from AIPAC-linked groups. Here's what she had to say. No, compared to your colleagues, you're minimal.
Am I low?
Yes,
Okay.
which is good. Do you think Americans have a right to fear that AIPAC is too powerful and that some people would say that it feels like we're almost controlled by Israel?
No, we're not. And you can't buy votes, okay, when you're up here legislating. Yes, we have to run for re-election. Yes, we have to raise money to do that. I've never gotten pressured by AIPAC. I've never said, hey, you have to do this. And I've never...
So it's not some insidious meeting in a parking garage where a guy with an AIPAC hat comes to you?
No, I would definitely not accept money from anyone threatening me. And that's just not a thing.
Mr. Johnson, Tom.
Hey, Tom,
nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Thanks for seeing us.
Certainly. Rep Hank Johnson is my handle, by the way. At Rep Hank Johnson.
First guy to do the good plug, so check him out, guys.
Yeah, check it out.
This is Representative Hank Johnson from Georgia, and he does not take AIPAC money according to the website Track AIPAC. Here's what he had to say.
The AIPAC PAC is powerful. The money that they put into elections can be influential, and so politicians do pay attention to that.
Hey there.
Hello.
How are you?
Come on in. Good. How you doing?
Good. Nice to meet you. Tommy.
Tommy.
How are you?
Medea.
Medea Benjamin is a Jewish woman who has been to Israel and once considered herself proud of Israel until her conscience forced her to stand against it. She's the leader of activist group Code Pink, and she's made it her mission to call out U.S. politicians for taking AIPAC money and enabling the destruction in Gaza. Here's what she had to say. Would it be your impression that many of our politicians are under Israeli influence?
That's such a mild way to put it. I mean, they are bought off by AIPAC, and that's not even the most important part. The most important part is they're scared to death of AIPAC. They're afraid that if they become the top, well, look at what they did to Cori Bush, look at what they did to Jamal Bowman, and you can go back, look what they did to Jewish Congressman Andy Levin. just because he said some mild things about Netanyahu. And so these members of Congress don't want to be in the crosshairs.
We've heard a few times now politicians mention Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman seemingly getting pushed out of office by AIPAC. Here's what Cori and Jamal had to say on the matter.
I got a message from someone in the community. AIPAC said to tell you that they know you're not going to change your stance. They just want you to be silent.
They are very strategic and very unapologetic.
Now let's break this down by highlighting Jamal's story. During his 2020 term, he was critical of Israel, calling what they were doing in Gaza a genocide and being one of the first politicians to demand a ceasefire. So when he ran for re-election in 2024, AIPAC-related PACs spent a record-setting $14 million to fund a challenger to unseat him. For comparison, his 2020 opponent spent under $2 million, meaning that AIPAC poured more than 8 times that amount to defeat him in 2024. It was the same story with Cori Bush when she also called the war in Gaza a genocide. An AIPAC ally spent $8 million against her, and she lost. So it seems AIPAC has real power to force out politicians they don't like. And when it appears to be lose your job or listen to AIPAC, allegedly, it's easy to see why politicians fall in line.
And so they either put their head down or they're more even brazen to say, yes, I'll go with AIPAC on a trip to Israel this recess instead of being with my constituents.
Recently in the news, I've been bombarded by stories of U.S. politicians visiting Israel. I've even heard New York mayoral candidates tripping over themselves to say how often they visit or want to visit Israel.
I would visit the Holy Land.
I would go to Israel.
Yeah, I'd make my 4th trip to Israel.
Me seemed a bit odd, and it made me wonder, are U.S. politicians visiting Israel an unusual amount? So we looked at the numbers. A 2024 study by the University of Maryland found that over 25% of all congressional trips were to Israel. And from 2011 to 2016, congressional members took 1,400 trips to Israel, which for comparison in the same time period, there were 88 to the UK and 154 trips to Japan, which are other countries that we also consider to be our greatest allies. And for Americans in the last couple weeks questioning whether their politicians are controlled by Israel, the news of a 250-person delegation to Israel could not have been worse timing. So does this mean that AIPAC simply outplays every other lobby in Washington, D.C. and should be celebrated for being effective? Or are we looking at something far more dangerous, which would be a foreign influence shaping American policy from the inside?
Is it that bad?
Yes, and it's bigger than AIPAC. A lot of times, there's a couple of arguments that get thrown around here to the uninformed. And one is that Israel is not even the biggest lobby. There's all these other nations that are bigger foreign lobbies than Israel. And it's because Israel's not a foreign lobby because they're not registered. Every other nation has to register their foreign lobby as a foreign lobbying group. And that's how it should be, because that way we have much higher standards for disclosure of where the money's coming from if you're a registered foreign agent. And you can actually look into the history of when AIPAC decided not to register. And it was right when John F. Kennedy got shot in the head. And you can actually go and read the original letters themselves of Kennedy's administration messaging. At the time, it was called the World Zionist Congress. And they were saying, you got to register, you're a foreign agent, here's it, and they send the paperwork. And they sent the paperwork over the month before JFK got shot.
Why is it not registered as a foreign entity?
The rules have been made easier for countries like that we consider to be allies. There are also a lot of people that are dual citizenship, so people think of Israel in a different way. There are a lot of American citizens who are also Israeli citizens.
So they're American citizens. So, I mean, if you're an American citizen and you're articulating a point of view, that's your right. So I'm not of the view that these people are not American citizens. They're doing everything legally. They're American citizens. They're lobbying for their interests. They're lobbying for the Netanyahu government's interests because they think that's what benefits America, and they're paying millions of dollars, which under Citizens United is legal. The problem is why we have a political system that has that be legal, and why don't we have more people with the courage to say, I don't care, because if the people are on my side, it's not going to matter.
Can you guess where this is?
It looks like the Middle East, but no?
Gaza.
Gaza, wow.
Pretty bombed to oblivion.
Yeah, it's very sad.
What's your reaction to seeing those photos?
Horrific. We were complicit. We gave Netanyahu a blank check. Look, the Hamas terrorist attack was awful. And I said that people who committed those crimes had to be brought to justice and the hostages had to be released. But that happened months in. Netanyahu has been bombing for 2 years. Over 60,000 people killed.
Reports out there estimate that anywhere between 70 to 95% of all housing stock in Gaza is damaged or destroyed. Listen to this take from Norman Finkelstein, a Jewish scholar whose mother and father both endured the horrors of the Holocaust.
95% of Gaza's housing is gone. Yeah. It was estimated that it would take until the year 2050 to just clear out the rubble.
I talked to an IDF commando, and if you look at the IDF position on the war, they are the most precise army in the world, and they are very fair in how they strike. In researching this story, I spoke with US Navy SEALs, a Canadian soldier, and others who have served overseas. Many of them supported the IDF's claim that Israel is actually taking extra precautions to limit civilian deaths by risking their own men's life to go door to door to warn Palestinians before bombing their homes. By contrast, in wars like Iraq in 2004, my sources say that civilian homes were often hit without warning. And it's worth noting that in the Battle of Fallujah, for example, the deadliest battle in the Iraq War, there was also an estimated 80% civilian casualty rate. And one theory I'm entertaining is that the casualty numbers we are seeing in Gaza aren't unprecedented, but rather is actually typical of urban warfare in densely populated areas, as several IDF soldiers have pointed out to me. The difference today is visibility, that this is the first major urban conflict where smartphone footage is uploaded daily. And if Iraq, Afghanistan, or Vietnam had been broadcast this way, I think the public outrage would have been just as strong. So to me, this suggests that the backlash on Israel isn't necessarily an anti-Semitic double standard, but rather, unfortunately for them, that this is the first time that the world is witnessing the brutality of war in real time on their phones.
First of all, they use 2,000-pound bombs. You can't be precise when you're using 2,000-pound bombs. Gaza is densely packed. This is just bombing of a city.
Even in this first picture, what I would call the good days, where there's still buildings standing.
Let's just start with one of the reports that's come out in the last few months with 83% civilian casualty rates. What would you say? Are those numbers accurate?
They're not accurate, and I'll tell you why. The United Nations gets their numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry. Who runs the Gaza Health Ministry? Hamas.
If I was an infantry company commander and I had 4 infantry platoons, I was moving into an area to conduct a combat operation where I knew there was enemy. And at the end of it, I killed the enemy, but 83% of the population was dead, I would be tried and sent to Leavenworth for war crimes.
If you're branding yourself as the most precise army in the world, I think those numbers say another story.
It's awful, but we need peace in Gaza. And I don't know how you get peace in Gaza without taking out Hamas.
The food they're eating is not nutritious food. It's aid food. And some of the food has fungus in it and has worms in it. Now they're airdropping these food pallets, which 3 airships equals 1 truck. It's all show. Sometimes the pallets actually drop on people's tents and kill them. So the Gazans have to go through a place where no human can go, okay, where the Israelis have, top-notch surveillance, tanks, drones, soldiers and APCs with machine guns. They have to walk through these corridors that kind of cordon them off like cattle to the aid point. Now you have American mercenaries with machine guns and grenades and tear gas and whatnot watching them. For every, for example, 10,000 people, there's only 1,000 pallets of food. So there's this fight to see who can get the food first. And then they have to get corralled through this exit, which is just like cattle, right? Exit on the way back out, and on the way back out, the Israelis and the Americans shoot over their heads to corral them out quicker.
Americans are shooting too?
Yeah.
That Hamas has taken them. And we know that for 50 to 60% of every dime that's gone to humanitarian aid in Gaza has gotten into the hands of Hamas.
So yeah, starvation is absolutely real. Last week, they even went to a point further than starvation called famine, worst food hunger you can get into. We saw 2 babies in the neonatal ICU, Zainab and Hassan. Yeah, they were at the end stage of their life. We were requesting baby formula to be brought in. And we actually told the doctors who were coming in next to bring in baby formula, and it got confiscated at the Israeli borders. I myself, just being there for 2 weeks, I lost 12 pounds.
Who says we're gonna starve the people so much that they suffer that we're gonna force the surrender? It's sick. And your tax dollars, my tax dollars are funding them because both Biden and Trump gave Netanyahu a blank check.
Israel could not give them humanitarian aid. Israel could choose not to provide humanitarian aid to the Gazans. Did you know that that the United States did not provide humanitarian aid in Afghanistan or Iraq?
How many kids did you come across with bullet holes or bomb residue?
Yeah, so again, I don't know the exact number. For every 100 patients, I would say 10 to 15 were kids, 10 to 15 were women, and then you have 10 to 15 elderly / handicapped, and then the rest men. Almost in the very young men, just past 18 years old, who are just the strongest person in their family, and they were tasked to go get the food, the aid at these GHF sites, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and they're supposed to walk kilometers in the heat with their sandals or their barefoot, and they're the ones who are supposed to go get it, and they're shot.
Take a look at the writing in blue.
Wow. Highest number of child amputees worldwide? I mean, it's just sickening that we're doing this to kids. What crime did they commit? These are crimes, and there needs to be accountability.
One thing that really stood out to me was the Nasser Hospital, which, according to many reports, is one of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza. And there was a doctor from my hometown that served there as an American, and after he got back, shortly after, it got bombed twice.
Double tapped, some people say triple tapped. On live TV, they killed the rescuers and bombed them. The very stairs that I walked, the very people I worked with, medical students, journalists. It's a war crime on TV, but kind of the news cycle's over and we're past that.
It's not a war crime because the aid workers that were posing as aid workers that were Hamas, we had journalists that are Hamas, but they're posing as journalists. And when Israel finally took them out, and knowingly that the optics is not going to look good, but we can't keep letting them use the disguise in order to continue the warfare against Israel. And then what happens is then you get that reporting on most of the mainstream media that will jump on the story without looking deeply into the facts on the ground and discovering, oh, that guy was a Hamas person.
IDF soldiers often call themselves part of the most ethical army in the world. But would the most ethical army be linked to killing over 240 journalists? According to the UN Human Rights Office, 242 journalists have been killed in Gaza, making this the deadliest war for journalists to cover in history. The most common defense I hear from IDF soldiers is the journalists were Hamas.
I do know that Hamas would have their weapons depots under hospitals. They put citizens at risk.
Let me ask you about this.
Let's just establish some reality, okay?
I don't want to get steamrolled again. If you were in a restaurant with your entire...
I'm not steamrolling you.
A little bit. If you were in a restaurant with your entire family and there was one terrorist in there, would it be acceptable for anyone to bomb that restaurant to kill the terrorist if they also killed your innocent family? Is that ever an acceptable answer?
So war is hell, which is why you want to avoid it. Okay. The only way you end war is you have to defeat the enemy.
To say that they're using civilian grounds, I think is an excuse to invade these areas, to bomb these areas, to level these areas, to get rid of the buildings, to eventually have their plan of occupation and settlement and eradication of the Palestinian people.
Do you think Benjamin Netanyahu is guilty of war crimes?
I think that there's definitely been war crimes committed in Gaza, and that he's the prime minister. But again, the legal determinations the International Court of Justice is going to do, and there should be a court and there should be a process.
Every other home in Gaza has like stuff like this. This was gift wrapped in a house in Gaza. We found like hundreds of these, and this is like Hamas terrorist, right? T-shirt, okay? This is like what the kids wear for their summer camps in Gaza, right? Wow. And this is recruiting, yeah? So their summer camp is recruiting for terrorism. Every home had an affiliation for one of the terrorist groups. Who's the masterminds behind all these groups? This right here, the Muslim Brotherhood. It's easy to label Hamas as terrorists, and they've undoubtedly committed terroristic acts. But let's ask ourselves honestly, what makes a man grow up to hate another country? Because I don't think the Taliban despise Americans simply because we had freedom, but rather because we bombed and occupied their homeland for decades. After all, a freedom fighter only exists when someone feels they have no freedom. And when you look at the reality that Palestinians have faced for several decades, blockades, military checkpoints, homes demolished or taken by Israeli settlers, electricity and water being cut off, and entire generations growing up under occupation, is it really surprising that resistance movements would form? And furthermore, one could argue Israel indirectly propped up Hamas to encourage division in the country and prevent the more reasonable and democratic PLO from uniting the Palestinians. Now, this does not in any way excuse the innocent Israelis dying in the horrific October 7th attacks, but as an American who regrets what my country did in the Middle East since 2001, I do think this context is important to consider. You got to spend some time with IDF soldiers.
I did.
Did you feel they conducted themselves professionally, or did you feel like they had a callous attitude towards killing?
I felt they had a very, I would call it an inhumane approach to killing. When I first got into Gaza on the 24th of May, I was at site number 1, and an IDF infantry squad was moving past the area. He was like, hey, and he spoke in a Boston accent. I was like, oh, you're Israeli? And he was like, oh, I'm from Boston, I'm here serving in the IDF. An American serving in the IDF. And he was like, oh, you're part of the new American food thing? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, why are you feeding our enemies? And I was like, well, I think we're here to prevent Hamas from getting the food. And he was like, everybody here is our enemy.
What Anthony is pointing out is a little unsettling. There are Americans, not dual citizens, who go to Israel to serve in the IDF. I've personally spoken with 3 of them. And folks, to be precise, these guys are not acting as paid mercenaries. They are enlisting as soldiers in the IDF. Now, I can understand a Jewish American having a profound emotional tie to Israel, a nation central to their heritage, faith, and identity. But let's flip the perspective. Imagine Americans taking leave from their jobs in Boston or California, traveling to China to become Chinese soldiers and fight under the Chinese flag for a few weeks, then returning home to resume their American lives. Would that strike you as odd? To me, it raises serious questions. Like, if these Americans are willing to fight for Israel, but not in the United States military, where does their loyalty truly lie?
Because a lot of people are saying we're committing genocide, right? Fact check. Look at the population growth in Gaza since 2023, October 7th, and you'll actually see that the percentile of the population growth has grown.
That sounds almost unbelievable to hear, given the numbers that are coming out of the conflict, that it's not people dying there, it's actually the population's growing and flourishing. While 1.9 million people are displaced, there's near famine and starvation conditions.
Yeah,
that's where it feels like, okay, we're getting propaganda. That's impossible.
That's right, you're getting propaganda. So these are facts I'm giving you, right? It doesn't mean people aren't dying.
In fact, now they're creating these humanitarian cities, corridors, which are basically concentration camps. And they want to eventually get everyone from the north of Gaza down south to Rafah into these camps where they can come in, but they cannot leave unless they voluntarily emigrate to a different country.
And by the way, a refugee camp was just recently bombed as well.
Yeah. When you look at that in terms of, okay, what is a concentration camp? Well, when you take a population away from where they live, and you take the population away from where they live in the whole country, and you concentrate the entire population into one area, onto one camp, that is a concentration camp.
How much are you risking right now by coming out and speaking about this?
Everything. My reputation, my health, my safety, my future, everything that I worked for 25 years in uniform, to the reputation that I built in terms of being a patriot.
Why do you think the world is allowing this to happen?
Complacency.
I'm not saying Israel hasn't made any mistakes, okay? Because that's the other thing that people don't understand. In
More
warfare,
journalists have died covering Israel, covering this war, than in any modern conflict.
Has your feed been flooded by videos? A girl carrying a bucket, bomb, hospital, bomb, aid station, hit by an IDF truck, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
When we ask people on the Israeli IDF side, they say that's Hollywood, that's fake.
Well, they're just wrong. I mean, I'm not going to defend every single video, because then they're going to put up one video that actually was fake.
It's Hollywood. It's a funny concept, and it's very creative. But I was there for 2 weeks, and hundreds of other physicians, surgeons, pediatricians, nurses, healthcare workers, aid workers from the West, from America, from the UK, from Australia, from Germany were there. And to say we are all liars and it's all Hollywood and we are part of that Hollywood is just obscene.
All of the IDF soldiers I spoke to brought up the claim of what they called Gazawood or Hollywood, or in other words, there being a lot of fake, staged, or AI videos used to turn people against Israel. Here are some of those clips. And after seeing some of these videos, I do agree something feels staged or off. However, most would argue, as with any war, propaganda is used by both sides, and this still does not negate the hundreds of real and horrible videos we've all seen circulating our feeds where refugee camps and children are getting blown up, entire cities appear to be bombed out, and the countless other examples of humanitarian carnage.
Iran-backed Hamas terrorists have been holding civilians hostage for 706 days.
So this is really the crux of the conflict right now, according to the official U.S.-Israel narrative, is until everyone here is released, we will not stop, which I think is fair. If my people are somewhere else and they're being tortured or whatever it is, you want them back. There's no question about it.
I mean, these people were innocent. They were at mostly a music festival. The part of this conversation that gets left out so often is that on day one, Hamas offered to free all the hostages. The only request was that Israel does not enter Gaza.
These people
Tragic
matter.
story.
If you are on the Palestinian side of this conflict and you can't say that these people matter, you have lost your touch. You've lost the narrative as well. I saw reports that there's testimony given by IDF soldiers that they were instructed to stand down between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. on October 7th. Is there any truth to that?
No. There were some troops that were asked to stand down. My unit, for example, was asked to stand down and not to participate in rushing to the scene, and there's tactical reasons for that. The concern was that we would have an attack from the north by Hezbollah and or in Judea, Samaria, and if we sent all the forces and all the units to Gaza to thwart off the attack that was happening there, we wouldn't have any forces or units to send as a response to the north or to the West Bank in uprisings there.
And folks, the fact is, conspiracy or not, October 7th attacks left over 1,000 innocent Israelis dead, and that bloodshed continues to fuel Israel's campaign to root Hamas out of Gaza. What's the solution with Palestine? You want to propose a Palestinian state. What does that mean for Palestine, and what does that mean for Israel feeling protected that another October 7th isn't going to happen again?
Well, that should be the policy, no October 7th again, and not militarily eliminate Hamas, which is where Netanyahu's policy is. It means Israel is a secured state, Jewish homeland, democratic state for the Israeli people. Palestine, no Hamas, democratic elections, demilitarized, is a Palestinian state with the help of Jordan and Egypt and other Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, to help make sure that it is secure, that it isn't overtaken at all by terrorists or Hamas, and that it will not threaten Israel. And it recognizes Israel's right to exist as a Jewish homeland. And people say that's hard. Yes, it's hard, but we have to work towards peace. There's no other alternative.
Was there another American political commentator recently speak on podcasts about the disruption and dissent against Netanyahu before October 7th?
Yeah.
Who is that?
Charlie Kirk.
There's many young men in America that are actually questioning and I think have decent reason to ask that Israel is on the suspect list of who killed Charlie Kirk.
Which is insane. And where did you get that? The mainstream media that are trying to throw Israel under the bus into another conspiracy. They also said that Israel is behind 9/11. Of course, Israel also controls the mainstream media, right? Also Israel controls all the banks. That's why Israel demonizes Israel on the mainstream media. Make perfect sense,
so which
right?
one is it? Is it kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, just use common sense. There's a lot of Americans that are starting to question how much control the Israeli government has over our administration. I mean, you talked about the freedom of speech. You talk about there's contractors in certain states that if the state boycotts Israel, the contractor can't work for them or they can't receive aid money if their house gets hit by a tornado. What is going on?
So this is another very emotional issue, and I'll get grief just for saying this, but boycotting something is an American tradition. Not only did we boycott the British tea, we dumped it in the harbor, but there were boycotts at the time of everything British. Israel's per capita income rivals Europe, rivals ours. I mean, they've done incredibly well. They're smart, they're talented, they work hard.
The innovation that's coming out of there.
And the what?
The innovation that's coming out.
Yeah, innovation from tech, all of that stuff. But that's also a reason why we shouldn't have to subsidize everything they do.
It is really hard to get U.S. politicians to speak about Israel or AIPAC. Many staffers shut us down the moment that we said we wanted to talk about those subjects, even if they previously said their senator was available for an interview. I mean, just watch this exchange on Breaking Points with Michigan Senator Elisa Slotkin.
Do you think AIPAC should register as a foreign lobby?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that I know plenty of people who think they should. I
It's
don't.
kind of a cop-out answer, don't you?
I mean,
Yeah.
I literally, I just guess I'd have to look at the definition. I certainly have had my tough moments with that organization. And
so you stop accepting their funding?
You gotta get your facts straight.
Senator Slotkin has taken $656,000 from AIPAC-linked groups, so it's no wonder she dodged these questions, and she's not alone. This is how the vast majority of our politicians are operating right now, and it just makes this whole thing weird, because if this is the right move and Israel is truly our greatest ally, then why are they so afraid to speak on it? It doesn't make any sense. We were just talking to a lot of senators' teams, and they said, yeah, you can talk to the senator, but one thing you cannot ask about is Israel. What's your take on that?
Well, I think for a lot of our elected politicians, Israel is a sensitive subject. That's concerning, because I think that when you ask somebody What can I not talk about? The answer is, then you know who controls you. We can't talk about Israel. Why not? We give them our tax dollars. We fight in their wars. Is it money? Is it religion? Is it politics? Is it power? Is it a combination of all of them? I don't know. But in my mind, there is not a dollar amount on the planet worth turning a cheek to a genocide.
Israel is an extremely useful asset to have in the Middle East, both from a Western Empire domination perspective, as well as from a money-making, deal-making, political maneuvering perspective. It's very useful to have a nuclear-armed nation that depends on us for foreign aid and for their very survival in many ways. They're working on our behalf.
Like I said, there's a lot of technology connections. If you use an iPhone, you probably have a lot of stuff on there that comes from Israel. And there is a connection in terms of culture. I mean, the religious foundations.
To understand America's support for Israel, you have to look at the country's deep ties with American evangelical Christians. You see pastors like Kenneth Copeland funding Israeli surveillance, while others like Greg Locke are openly calling for Gaza's destruction.
Israel should make the Gaza Strip a parking lot by this time next week.
It's evident that many on the Christian right fiercely defend Israel, and it's worth asking why. One theory is because evangelicals interpret biblical prophecy to mean Israel's survival is directly tied to the second coming of Christ. They take verses like Genesis 12:3, Ezekiel 37, and Revelation 16 to generally conclude that the end times will be centered around a battle for Jerusalem. So for many of these evangelicals, supporting Israel is not just a political stance, but it is a way of aligning with what they believe is God's unfolding plan for history. Every president in recent memory, from Obama to Bush to Trump to Clinton, says Israel is our greatest ally. Why do you think they say that?
Israel has been a staunch ally in the Middle East. They continue to be that way. But what has happened with the state of Israel is it has come under the control of a right-wing extremist who's not interested in peace. And that has led this country to where it is now committing genocide.
Are they our asset, or are we theirs, or a combination?
Isn't that the question? The Zionists would say that it's a partnership, right? The Zionists would say that we love Israel and Israel loves us and we support each other and we both promote Western values and we're both, he's the only democracy in the Middle East, right? Sort of. Assets are relationships based on manipulation, coercion, control, inherently. Allies is a relationship built on friendship and shared growth and shared gain. And ally is a word that I would not use to describe Israel. Do allies spy on each other secretly? Maybe. Do allies spy on the terrorists that conducted 9/11 and then not tell you what they're seeing? Maybe. Do allies send Jeffrey Epstein into the White House 17 times to apparently develop a relationship with the President of the United States and then probably blackmail him? Definitely not.
And let's just say we do want to be allies with Israel. Are we not able to hold them to standards that we should hold every other country to for war? Yeah, war is ugly, I get that. And you got to take out what they view as the bad guy, the militants. Okay, if you were taking them out specifically.
As Americans, what do we want in our legacy? We want to be honorable people who defended the voiceless, who defended the downtrodden. That's kind of our story. We're always rooting for the underdog. And then when it comes to this genocide, we are aiding and abetting the eradication of civilians. And I think us American citizens want the best for people, for humanity.
Yeah. One big thing Americans need to think about as we continue to fund Israel and stand by during the destruction of Gaza is this. Is our support of them helping us or hurting us on the world stage? Can we honestly say that backing Israel is winning us allies, or is it isolating us and turning much of the global community against the United States? Because at some point, we have to ask whether our loyalty to one nation is costing us the respect of the rest of the world.
The thing that makes conversations about Israel so complicated is that we are having this conversation inside of an information war. We are in the nexus of one of the largest propaganda campaigns the world has ever known. because there is an entire nation's future on the line. And so the first thing you need to understand in order to understand anything about the Israel conversation is that Israel knows that winning the hearts and minds of the American people is the most important victory that they can possibly have on the battlefield. And they spend billions of dollars targeting American minds through politics, through media, through brands, through celebrities, through every piece of messaging that they can possibly use. Because if America starts to genuinely question our relationship with Israel in any meaningful way, Israel has to rewrite their entire playbook of how they do what they do and what their goal is.